So, first thing I want to touch on this week, Dr. P, good morning. Do you want to share with the group your new word?
I was reading a paper yesterday and there was a great word in said paper, blebbing. It's something about
cells,
part of a cell membrane detaching from the cell cytoskeleton, resulting in a protrusion. That process is called blebbing. And I don't know if studying it is blebology, but I hope so because that's a great word as well. It does sound a bit like an insult though.
You blab.
You bloody bleb. He's an absolute bleb.
This is The Method, a podcast from Thriver about what health looks like in the real world.
I'm Dr. Greg Potter. I'm a scientist and health and performance consultant.
And I'm Charlie Edmondson. I'm definitely not a science expert. I've got a regular job and I'm here to remind Greg of what life's actually like when you're not a nerd.
You must be a nerd about something, I bet you are. On this show, we'll work out some sustainable changes to your routine that are actually going to make a difference to your health. And to do that, we have a simple 3-step method. With the help of an expert, we first unpack the science behind one key health question. Second, we give some recommendations related to what we're speaking about on the day. And then finally, we put the practice to the test.
Each week, we're going to hear from those who have tried and tested our recommendations to help turn a so-called ideal lifestyle into something that actually works for you.
What are we talking about today?
We've got another Q&A session because we get loads of listener questions, don't we? And we never have time because we like to talk too much to get through them with our guests. So we thought, utilise our in-house nerd and ask you the questions. So we're covering 2 subject topics today, weight loss and maintaining physical strength as we age.
Lovely.
Do you want me to hit you with the first question?
Go on then. Wallop me.
Hit me with your best shot. Why don't you hit me with your best
Hit me with your
shot?
rhythm stick.
Hit me, hit me. Oh, there's so many songs that we could, might just transition them in. So first section, weight loss. So this question was off the back of our Science of Weight Loss episode with Dr. David Allison. And the theme was around plateauing during weight loss. Mel in St. Helens has asked, I successfully lost 2.5 stone last year using Mounjaro. I didn't change anything as I already eat a healthy diet and I'm very active. However, although I am keeping the weight off using a 2.5 milliliter dose weekly, I don't seem to be able to lose any more. Why?
First things first, not a medical doctor, PhD, fake doctor right here. So please bear that in mind.
Oh, you're like Ross on Friends.
Any decisions that you make about this should be made in conjunction with a medical doctor, but I will share some thoughts because I want to be helpful. I also want to be clear that it's great that you kept the weight off. That's not that common. After most people lose weight, they soon regain some or even all of the weight that they have lost. Regarding Mounjaro, so the drug name is tirzepatide, just keep that in mind if I refer to tirzepatide. The dose that you've been using, 2.5 milligrams, is a common starting dose. But from that point, the dose is normally escalated depending on side effects. For weight loss, people might escalate that dose in 2.5 milligram increments up to a dose as high as 15 milligrams, so 6 times as high as the one that you've been using. And if someone just takes 2.5 milligrams per week continuously, I'd expect there to be some initial weight loss, but then a plateau. And that is what seems to have happened here. So if you want to continue weight loss using the medication, you could try a higher dose under supervision. You might have already tried one, but if not, that would be the natural next step. Probably initially increase to 5 milligrams, see how you get on, and then continue that dose until you reach another plateau. And then you could increase that further to 7.5 milligrams and so on, up to a max of 15, bearing in mind those side effects. And then once you've reached your target weight, I would look to taper down to a maintenance dose, which might well be the 2.5 milligram dose that you're currently taking. And The evidence does suggest that if people just discontinue the medication, they will regain the weight, much as occurs when people stop weight loss diets. And then if you've had problems taking a higher dose of tirzepatide, let's say that previously you've tried 10 milligrams, another option is to try a different medication. Right now, though, tirzepatide is about as potent as these medications get of the ones that are available for consumers. There's one in development called retatrutide that is more potent than tirzepatide because it acts on more targets in the brain, but that's still in phase 3 clinical trials. It's not available yet. It does seem to be very safe. It's hugely promising, and people lose weight faster on retatrutide than tirzepatide. It will be available in the not too distant future, so it's probably one to keep in the back pocket, but I would start with the high dose.
So another popular weight loss question that we've had is around intermittent fasting. I know you've done this before, haven't you?
Yeah, I've used time-restricted eating, which I'll come to, on and off. And if anyone wanted a cure for insomnia, they would be able to find probably hundreds of hours of me speaking about chrononutrition and time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting on the internet.
Well, our question is from Anonymous. They want to keep themselves hidden.
Mysterious.
They have asked, what's better, fasting for longer periods or more frequent, shorter fasts?
To answer that question, I would want more information, but I'd also ask a related question, better for what? Both can be helpful. Which is best depends on the context. It probably makes sense to begin with how I personally define different forms of fasting, because I think there's a lot of confusion about this. When I speak about intermittent fasting, I'm talking about occasional abstinence from anything containing a substantial number of calories. Operationally, we can define that as, say, 5 calories, because if I just said water, then that would mean that if someone has a black coffee, then that means they're no longer fasting. But practically, that's going to have a negligible effect on everything. So I think it's fine to include drinks that contain less than 5 calories per serving. In the case of intermittent fasting, then, that would mean going without food and anything containing a substantial number of calories for at least 24 hours at once. So, for example, you might finish all your food on one day at 6 p.m. and then have nothing but water and black coffee and black tea until 6:30 p.m. the next day. There is actually a recognized world record holder for the longest fast. It was a Scottish bloke named Angus Barbieri. He went 382 days without food and he lost 125 kilograms.
No, I just don't know why. Well, I would be so aggy.
It was medically supervised.
I consider not eating through the night a fast. If you said to me fast for 24 hours, it would just be a painful experience for all involved.
And then time-restricted eating is the other thing that I'll speak about. And that involves restricting intake of anything containing a substantial number of calories to a period of less than 12 hours each day. So, for example, you might start your first meal of the day at 8 a.m., finish at 6 p.m., so that'd be a 10-hour eating window or caloric period, to use nerd speak. And sometimes this happens without people realizing it. A good example would be Ramadan. Depending on where someone is and what the dark cycle is like, that might be a form of time-restricted eating. But then we can further break down time-restricted eating into mild forms or more severe restriction. So mild might be a 10 to 12-hour eating window. Whereas if someone's consuming all their food in 6 hours or less each day, or even going as far as having one meal a day, that's very severe time-restricted eating. So now we can go into some applications of each, but does that delineation make sense?
Yeah, I'm just curious though, because if you said to me, Charlie, go and do time-restricted eating, why would someone do, if it's not for weight loss, why would someone do time-restricted eating, or is it just purely for weight loss?
It can be for weight loss, certainly. And mild forms of time-restricted eating, like the 10 to 12-hour window could be almost universally used without any detrimental effects. It's a lot easier for most of us to stick to than intermittent fasting. And if you look at studies on it, the most recent systematic review that I've seen found on average people lose about 1.6 kilograms using time restricted eating relative to a control group that carries on eating as normal. And they do lose a bit of fat mass and their waists shrink a little bit too, as you'd expect. There could potentially be some small effects on metabolic, cardiovascular health and inflammation beyond the weight loss. But certainly the weight loss, if that happens, is going to contribute to some of those improvements. Again, the effects that we see here aren't dramatic. For example, you'll tend to see a reduction in both blood pressure numbers, the higher one and the lower one, by just under 2 millimeters of mercury. That's just the unit of blood pressure. Tend to see a small drop in resting heart rate, small drop in fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin, and then also in a measure of insulin resistance. And that's true of the gold standard measure of insulin resistance, which is very relevant to things like risk of diabetes and dementia. So the health effects are modest, but they are there. And there are probably some other applications that aren't so well studied. There's some really interesting research by Frank Shear and Sarah Chalapa, who's his postdoc on this. And they found that if you have people carry on eating during the daytime hours when they're going through simulated shift work, that daytime restricted eating helps prevent deterioration in several aspects of their health, including blood sugar control, various measures of cardiovascular health and function, and mood. So I think it can be helpful in various instances. And we know something about some of the mechanisms too. One of the factors is probably just that if the people trying it, spreading out their food intake over a long period at baseline, then even restricting their eating window to 10 hours will be quite a big difference. And that is going to affect their food intake a bit. It probably doesn't affect the actual food choices that people make that much. It doesn't seem to affect diet quality that much. I think it might do in some instances. So a good example is if you decide that you're going to finish your calorie intake by 7 p.m. and normally you're sat on the sofa eating crisps and drinking wine at 8:30 p.m., then it's reasonable to think that it might change your diet quality a little bit. And then related to that, there's some tentative evidence that time restricted eating could help with longevity, but that's based on studies of other animals. But it's interesting in that that effect seems to be absent of any change in body weight. And we've known for some time that if you just give animals less food, then when they're allowed free access to food round the clock, they do live longer. But interestingly, if you add time restriction to that, they live longer still. So there are a few applications outside of weight loss that are interesting, but I just want to be clear, the effects aren't huge. They are there, and some of the nuances matter.
I love how I asked for 2 or 3 and I got 8 minutes, I think, of detail.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh dear, oh dear. And also that was just about time restricted eating. I didn't speak about intermittent fasting.
You didn't know. Phenomenal.
Do you want me to cover that just quickly?
Yeah.
So when might someone want to use that 24-hour fast? Well, an obvious one is if someone's got some sort of digestive problem, like food poisoning.
Oh, okay.
All of us just naturally do that without thinking about it. Another is you could use it as part of a weight loss program. That's probably going to be most helpful if someone's got lots of fat mass to lose, because the more fat that you have at baseline, the smaller proportion of the weight that you lose that will be fat mass. Your body will hold on to more of its lean mass. Whereas if you're lean at baseline and you go through a fast, you're going to lose more of your fat-free mass in relative terms. So for someone who's very heavy, I think this is potentially a bit more useful. I think it's also an interesting teaching tool. I think some people nowadays have forgotten what hunger really feels like. and it's not necessarily a bad idea.
They should run a marathon.
Then you get it for days after.
The hunger that you feel after that, days after the training, I used to have to put snacks next to my bed in the middle of the night and wake up at 3 a.m. like a little mouse, eating a rice cake.
And then in terms of how you might use the 24-hour fast or intermittent fasting generally, you could start at a frequency that feels doable for you. So maybe you just try it as a one-off thing. And if it's helpful, you decide, I'm going to try that again. Initially, you might try that once every 2 weeks or once every 7 days. And if you've got lots of fat mass to lose, you could increase the frequency. So maybe it's once every 7 days, but then you try once every 6 days, then once every 5 days, and then find something that you feel is doable for you. But for most people, I think time-restricted eating is more applicable and potentially more helpful. But like I said, it's not for everyone.
I'm not going to give it a go. I'm happy to test out some of the theories for the pod, but
I think you're a perfect example of someone who is unlikely to benefit from it and who could actually be negatively affected by it. Because
100%. You wouldn't be my friend anymore.
It would have all sorts of repercussions for everyone involved. But the reason that I say that in your context, Crump, is because you do a lot of exercise. And when someone has very high training volumes, if they're doing something that could reduce their energy intake and hence energy availability, then that could first compromise their ability to perform in training and recover from the training. But then also it could just mean that their body is under more stress in total. And then that can manifest in various ways. We've spoken a little bit about relative energy deficiency in sport.
Yeah. You lose the ability to make a decision. Like if I'm hungry, it's like I can't, it's genuine that my body's like, no. We're not using our brain until you fed us. And then we can make a decision, like standing there like, oh no, it's happened.
So someone who is doing loads of exercise might not be a good candidate for this. Someone who's got a history of disordered eating or even eating disorder, also this might not be a good choice because it involves some sort of restriction. If you're just under loads of stress generally, physical or psychological, this might pose some additional stress. If you want to get pregnant and you're struggling with that, then potentially a bad idea. And if you are already pregnant, then you might also not want to jump into this if you haven't used it historically. There's not really evidence showing that it is bad for pregnancy outside of some tentative evidence that Ramadan fasting during pregnancy isn't associated with healthy birth outcomes relative to controls, but that is confounded by other things. Anyway, let's move on.
Sorry for the interlude, but give us a moment to talk about Thriver, the company behind this podcast. Charlie, take it away.
Oh, no pressure. So, what we do on The Method is try and help you play the long game with health. You know, the whole longevity thing.
It's very scientific of you.
I'm trying, Greg, I'm trying. And, well, basically, Thriver is built to help you on that journey to long-term health too. They offer tests you can do at home and give you a picture of your blood markers. The goal is to see where you're starting from, make changes, and retest a few months after.
They also have a comprehensive app. You can sync your wearable devices like smartwatch or smart ring, information about your health, such as your goals, your exercise habits, how you eat, and collate all of that in one place. And this way, over time, you can see relationships between things, identify what's actually working.
It's a really simple tool to turn good resolutions into habits that really stick. So check them out at thriver.co, links in the show notes below.
Sweet. Now back to today's episode.
So we're now moving into maintaining physical strength as we age. So this question, I think, came off the back of the episode with Dr. Tommy Wood, where I'm still gutted that he didn't sing with us. I think we need to revisit that purely for the singing. It's about age and cognitive decline that made a lot of people write in about the physical side of aging. So the first question is quite a general one around this topic. And Michelle in Nuneaton has asked, what is the best thing to do to keep your strength and not lose muscle mass?
Resistance training.
Resist.
Next question.
That can be a world record for the fastest response ever given by Dr. Greg Potter. It happened once. He gave a 2-second answer. We have spoken about this quite a bit, haven't we? About resistance training and the importance of it. And
we have, but to elaborate on the short answer that I just gave, this comes back to a principle in biology that's come up before. Use, disuse. Organs adapt to the demands that are placed on them. And if you withdraw those demands, then the body will do away with what it considers to be non-essential. And we discussed this with Filippo in the first instance, in the extreme example of spaceflight and how people's bodies change during spaceflight. I want to be clear that muscle mass and strength do tend to go hand in hand. If you increase your skeletal muscle mass, you'll tend to increase strength too. The relationship isn't perfectly uniform, but it's very much there. We can break this down into a few pillars of lifestyle though. And I spoke about resistance training there because activity is the most important. And within activity, resistance training is the thing that matters. And if people want to listen to more about the subject, go back and listen to our episode with Eric Helms. There's lots of helpful information in there. If you want to at least retain your muscle mass and strength as you get older, then you need to ask at least as much of your musculoskeletal system as you currently ask of it. So for someone who has no history of resistance training, that could be as little as 1 work set for all major muscle groups done twice a week, which is congruent with current resistance training guidelines. For someone with an extensive background in resistance training who's got more muscle mass and strength at baseline, that volume will need to be much higher if they're going to hold on to what they currently have. It could need to be over 10 sets per muscle group per week for some individuals.
Well, that's quite a lot, isn't it?
It is quite a lot. And that's more important for muscle than it is for strength. Volume is a bigger lever to pull if you want to increase your muscle mass than it is if you want to gain strength. Strength responds a little bit less to volume. I think an important point is err on the side of caution. So start on the low side, and then you can ramp things accordingly over time. And then outside of any effect that this would have on training volume, the frequency with which you train a muscle group, so the number of times per week, probably isn't going to affect your muscle growth much, but it might affect your muscle strength a little bit. And I personally think that if you want to maximize strength, you want to train a bit more frequently, much the way that if you want to improve any skill, it's better to distribute your practice. Like if you're going to play the piano, you're trying to get better. You don't want to do 7 hours in one chunk. You want to do 1 hour in 7 chunks across the week. That would be much better in terms of outcomes. I think strength is probably a little bit like that. And then regarding training intensity, so the weight that's on the bar, I think you can build muscle with as little as 30% of your 1 rep max, the max that you could lift one time. But if you want a mix of strength and muscle mass, then you should probably be spending most of your time lifting in the range of about 70 to 85% of 1 rep max, because strength requires higher intensities. And that's generally going to equate to a weight that you could lift between about 6 and maybe 14 times before you reach fatigue and you couldn't lift the weight anymore. And then as long as you're doing some work per muscle group in that range, you could include some lower intensity work as an additional muscle growing stimulus. The important thing is effort. You got to apply yourself at each of the sets, probably no more than about 3 repetitions in reserve. So being within 3 reps of failure. And then finally, just bear in mind that if you're doing loads of endurance training, that does have some potential to interfere with your muscle mass and strength, especially if it's impactful endurance training. For that, there does seem to be greater interference from distance running than from endurance cycling. And it's to do with that impact.
Yeah.
Cycling is just easier to recover from
Greg,
than running.
Tell your bum that when you've been on a bike for 100 miles.
Yeah. No thanks. But I think generally for someone who's trying to focus on muscle mass and strength, that wants to do some endurance training, activities like stepping and cycling are probably going to be better than pounding the pavement. Is that consistent with what you've experienced too? Do you feel like distance running interferes more with your strength work than cycling does? Or is it hard to tell because you're always doing some of each of those?
No, I definitely notice my body just takes longer to recover when I'm running. I could cycle, and unless it was like a particularly hilly or really long cycle, I bounce back quite quickly from that. Whereas running, it could take me days to get back to it, and getting back into the gym and stuff. It just exhausting. I find running pick up a lot of niggles when I'm running, whereas with a bike, you just don't, because obviously you're not just putting all your weight through your joints. So yeah, obviously that was very much focused on being in the gym, weights, strength training. Is there anything nutrition wise that people could look at to help improve muscle mass and strength?
Yeah, of course.
I thought that was going to be another
obviously
full stop. Yes.
one sentence answer. Obviously, one of them is just how much you eat in total. If you're under eating, then maintaining your muscle mass and strength is going to be harder. Part of the reason for that is because your total calorie intake each day is likely to affect your total protein intake, which also matters. And there are a few variables that can modify this a bit, like how old you are, and related to that, how active you are. Also, the quality of the protein that you consume, like if it's from a plant source versus an animal source in general. Animal source proteins have a slightly higher quality based on widely recognized metrics. But I think most people will do well with a protein intake of something in the region of 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, which is substantially higher than what a lot of people will be consuming. Although certainly in the last few years, probably largely due to influences, people have woken up to the importance of protein, even though sports scientists have been banging that drum for about 3 decades. So protein matters. But
you're not bitter about it.
No, it's just entertaining. Protein matters, and then the distribution of the protein might matter a little bit too. Like, it's better to space out that protein intake relatively evenly over maybe 3 or 4 eating occasions, meals or snacks each day, than to have it all in one chunk. Not well tested, but that's likely the case. And then otherwise, I think carbohydrate intake is probably the most important factor, because carbohydrate is key to supporting some of the energy systems that you rely on during resistance training. So this is going to support your performance, but also your ability to recover from those sessions. However, you can still get good results on a low carb diet. And then in terms of supplementation for muscle mass and strength, creatine monohydrate is the best proven supplement for sure to support muscle and bone, although the work on bone is less conclusive and any effects are certainly small. I think a dose of about 0.75 grams of creatine per 10 kilograms of body weight per day is about right with your breakfast. To put that in perspective, if you're 100 kilograms, that's 7.5 grams of creatine with your breakfast. If you're 50 kilograms, that's 3.75. For a lot of people, something like 5 grams per day with breakfast will be fine. Right now, it's in vogue to supplement mega dose of creatine because of some potential effects on the brain. Don't need to worry about that in this context. And then there are some other supplements that are vaguely interesting, like ashwagandha, but much less well proven.
Final question in maintaining physical strength as we age is, how can osteoporosis best be prevented? I'm looking for strong bones. You and me both, sister.
So just for parents out there, there's a common refrain in the world of osteoporosis, which is that osteoporosis is a childhood disease. And what people mean by that, most of us will reach our peak bone mass around the end of physical maturation. So if you have youngsters, then it's important to try and get them to accumulate as much bone as possible while they're growing, because then that gives them bone reserve when they're older that will stop them from sliding into osteopenia or even osteoporosis. Another thing I'll add is that everything that we spoke about in the last question is relevant here too. So what's good for muscle and strength is also good for bone. So I would think about this in addition to what we've already discussed. And we can again break this down into different lifestyle domains. So regarding physical activity, like other tissues, bones respond based on the demands that we place on them. And in the case of bone, there's actually a law named Wolff's Law to describe this, which basically states that bones remodel in response to the loads that are placed on them. So bearing that in mind, a few things matter. One is the direction of the load that's placed on the bone. One is the magnitude of the load, and one is the rate at which that load is applied. And therefore, within reason, if we want strong bones, we want high loads applied quickly to stimulate the bones to get stronger so they can withstand similar forces in the future. And there are some examples of this that people might relate to. For example, if you look at the bones of tennis players and you compare their serving arm to their other arm, the bones in the serving arm tend to be about 20% more dense than the other arm because they use them so much, because they load them in that way with those high forces that are delivered quickly. And this is why high impact activities like fast running and jumping and landing can be so effective at building bone. It's also why it's best to load your bones in a variety of different ways if you want them to be resilient in a comprehensive way. Some of the ground reaction forces in gymnastics are probably about the highest in sport, but then other sports like basketball, extreme examples would be triple jump, long jump, Olympic weightlifting. Forces are enormous.
My knees hurt just
thinking about it.
Oh, it actually, no, not with my bones. I don't think I'd ever be a triple jumper.
So we're not saying go and start the triple jump. Instead,
go and learn how to tumble in your garden.
Instead, a lot of people are probably better off starting with resistance training, and it might need to be done at quite a slow cadence initially, and some low impact endurance training. And then as they get stronger and more physically able, they could start to introduce some other activities to load their bone. That could include certain types of jumping exercises. Even things like skipping rope can be helpful. But if you think about jumps, you can progress those in certain ways. For example, you could start with jumps up, like jumping up onto a box. And then after that, you could include jumping up onto the box, but then stepping down off the box and catching yourself. That landing produces quite high forces through your bones. And then otherwise, bear in mind that your balance is important to minimizing your risk of falls as you get older, these falls contributing often to fractures. So challenging your balance in your activity, as we discussed with Lauren Colenso-Semple, can be helpful. And that might just entail doing resistance training exercises that do challenge balance a little bit, like split squats, for example, as opposed to regular squats.
Stand on one leg when you're brushing your teeth.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah. Thrive a favourite, that one.
Stand on one leg or on a wobble cushion. I've got a wobble cushion in the bathroom. Haven't used it for about 4 years, but it's in the bathroom.
So Charlie, you famously, you broke a couple of bones not too long ago. Have you changed anything off the back of that in terms of your exercise, either to navigate that injury or to help stop something similar from happening in the future?
So I knew, obviously, when I did it, when was it now? Oh, it's nearly 2 years ago, I think. I was very lax with my strength and conditioning. I just used to run and assume that everything would be fine. So it's really funny that there was almost two sides to when I got really injured, like the mental side of it and the physical side. The mental side was probably harder to overcome. I essentially got paranoid about doing a box jump or anything that was putting any impact through my leg. But obviously you've just said you need to do this to strengthen your bones. And I really damaged my bones, but felt really worried about doing anything that would recreate the injury or cause it to come back. I think because I had such a prolonged period of time, the orthopedic surgeon had said, avoid stepping down off curbs too hard, avoid, when you climb out of the shower over the bath, don't put all your weight through your leg, try and support yourself. But obviously when I'd done that for 3 months, then going back to just putting all my weight through my legs was really, really hard. So it took a while to get back to being able to trust that my legs weren't going to fracture again. But yeah, it definitely changed then going into the marathon. I think because I knew how bad the injury was and how long I was out for, I just thought it's not worth skipping. Just make an extra 3 hours a week to do some strength and conditioning. And I saw the improvement was massive.
And for someone like you, the resistance training is not just going to help with preventing injuries, it's also going to potentially improve your performance if it's done well. Like it can improve running economy, for example. Did you change anything with respect to your nutrition? I remember you asking me about that because that's another factor that we should consider.
Yeah, I think so. I eat well. I eat a lot and I eat well, and I always cook fresh. I don't generally take that many supplements. But for my bones, it was quite difficult, isn't it? Because I don't drink dairy.
Yeah.
But you told me about sardines, didn't you? Tinned fish, which, again, not ideal for a non-real fish lover.
Yeah.
But then what with the bone restore? I took those bone restore supplements, didn't I? That had...
Yeah. Bone Restore is a supplement that's made by Life Extension that I really like because it covers the key micronutrient bases that are relevant to bone health. That product contains a substantial amount of calcium, which is really important. It also contains vitamin D3, and that helps your body absorb the calcium, among other things. Vitamin K2, that helps put the calcium in the places where you want it, like bone. Magnesium, lots of your bones are made out of magnesium, but it also contains boron, which is actually a really interesting trace mineral. It's not essential, but it does seem to be good for bone. And then silica and manganese, I think people don't need to worry about those so much, but certainly calcium does matter. And dairy, for the most part, is the best source. Some cheeses, especially hard cheeses, contain a lot of calcium, upwards of 700 milligrams per 100 grams, which is more than 3 times what you get from milk. But after that, the next most rich sources are things like sardines that have bones in them, and they can contain about half that amount of calcium. So people who are on plant-based diets might need to be a bit more attentive and consider supplementation for that reason. And then otherwise, making sure you've got enough protein, which I spoke about earlier, making sure that you've got sufficient total daily energy intake is going to matter as well. You're consuming enough calories. And those are the key nutritional factors to consider so that you're giving your body the raw materials necessary.
I really like cheese, so that's quite good for me. Go and have some hard cheese.
I like cheese. I like fish too. Win-win.
I like cheese and I like fish.
It reminds me of my nephew. I remember asking my nephew when he was 1.5, Max, what do you like? And he said, cheese and running. And as he said running, he just charged off and started doing laps.
Perfect. That could be me.
He's still the same now.
I also could be that 2-3-year-old child. Cheese and running. Right, that's all my questions for this week. I don't have any more questions on my list.
There are other things that we could have got to, like medications and stuff that are relevant to bone health, but maybe we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, so if anyone does have any questions for the method, then they can send them in via email to themethod@thriver.co or a voice note. We love a voice note, don't we? All the details will be in the show notes. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks so much for giving us your brain.
Bye, people.
Bye, everybody. You've been listening to The Method, Health in the Real World, a podcast brought to you by Thriver.
If you don't know about Thriver, it's a health tracking platform that helps you see where your health is heading and what to work on, as well as how to do it. They use painless at-home blood testing to look inside your body and see what's going on. Your tests are analysed by accredited labs, and based on the results, which are reviewed by doctors, you get personalised guidance from real people. People use Thriver like a compass, testing every few months to help steer their health to where they'd like it to be. It's a great tool to start feeling more empowered about your health and to get information that you need to make progress, even when life is chaotic.
Thriver also has some great content out there that can help you get to grips with complex health questions, exactly like what we're trying to do on this podcast. And all of that is free to access. So if you want to learn more, head over to thriver.co. That's thriver.co.
And if you want to listen to Charlie sing really, really well, subscribe to the show. Come back every week for more tunes. You won't be disappointed?
Well, unless you beg me to stop, but even then, probably not.
You can find us by email at themethod@thriver.co. Special thanks to the Thriver team and to Lower Street for helping us bring the show to life. Content direction by Rich Cousins, Hamish Grierson, Tamar Loach, Vishal Shah, and Katie Yockey. Production by our resident yogi, Lise Lavati, as well as Ryan Sutton and Sam Dattapoulin. Sound design by Alex Rose.
We're your hosts, Charlie Edmondson and Greg Potter, and we will see you next time.
Thanks and bye.